What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another video. In today's video, we are back with another episode of Lions Latest, going through the latest Detroit Lions news. And today, we have some late night breaking news. So let's get it started.
Fired up. It's made a great decision.
Great teammates, coaches, and other people who want to be Super Bowl champions. And we are. We're going to do it this year.
And we're going places, because we want to go places.
Touchdown, Detroit Lions!
Before long, we're going to be the last one standing.
Welcome everybody to a video. Glad you guys are here. And this is why it's good to have a messed up sleep schedule, because this is how the NFL offseason goes down. I still can remember when the Lions signed, or maybe they cut it, but I think they signed Nick Williams back with the last regime. And I feel like it happened at like 2 in the morning. It probably wasn't, but it felt like that, right? It was dark outside. And I was like, why is this just now happening? But we did a video on it anyway. I was probably a lot quieter in that video. Now I got a little more room. I could be a little bit louder with this video. With that said, I appreciate you guys for tuning in. Of course, as always, you're probably watching this the next day because you're probably sleeping. But if you're not and you're up here and Friday morning and you're like, dude, what the heck is going on? I'm gonna check it out. I appreciate that. With that being said, because this is breaking news, I'm going to try to keep this more short and sweet. We can always revisit some of these moves, but that's what I try to do with breaking news. So with that, there were some things that I already wanted to touch on, but now with the breaking news on top of it, I'm going to do my best to keep this straight and to the point. So let's get right into it. First off, we have a roster move expected by the Detroit Lions. This was reported that it's reportedly going to be kind of official tomorrow, that this is going to be officially announced, that the Detroit Lions are going to be releasing defensive tackle Michael Brockers. Now, this probably isn't a huge surprise. I think we've talked about this a ton. I actually just posted my mock offseason, and that was one of the moves in it, was releasing Michael Brockers. And that's just simply because of the financial situation. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. But basically, he can save us the most money pretty much without having much dead cap either. So releasing Michael Brockers saves the Detroit Lions $10 million in salary cap space, while leaving us with $3.975 million in dead cap, meaning you're basically just paying that money to a player that's no longer on the roster. But the important part is that you're saving $10 million in cap space with this cut. This one was kind of a no-brainer because Michael Brockers basically lost his role in the second part of the season with the Lions. In our defensive line video, we hit on that. Basically, early in the season, he was kind of like our 3-tech because of injuries that we had, and the Lions were like, hey, we need some girth, so we're going to go get Benito Jones and the Isaiah Buggs, but Levi was injured, so he kind of became like our 3-tech defensively. But then the Lions, about around the New England Patriots game, when they started to mix Demetrius Taylor in, and then coming out of that game after the bye week, the Lions said, you know what? We're not doing this no more. We're not getting the production that we need. We feel like Aleem McNeil's athletic enough to kind of play that role, have a two-way goal working against a guard to pass rush, and he can kind of test it out, and we'll probably get more production from that position. So at that point, Michael Brockers kind of just stopped playing within the Lions defense. It became Aleem McNeil, Isaiah Buggs, Benito Jones, and we kind of just rolled with those guys going forward. So Michael Brockers kind of lost his role with the Lions defense. Now, that's not to say he's been great with the Lions these past 2 years, but as we know, the biggest impact that I believe that he's had has to be with the leadership. And that's just something that you could say, but I really believe it's been an impactful piece for this Lions defense. I mean, the videos that would come out during the offseason when he first got here of him pulling all together these young guys, and I would assume, we don't get to see the locker room side, but the leadership that he just brings to that group alone, because what we do know is that that's a very young defensive line that the Lions have been building and putting together with Brad Holmes, the draft picks in the Aleem McNeils and the Levis and the new additions that are still also young, the Benito Jones, the Isaiah Buggs. They're young players, and the Lions have also had to adjust on the fly, play different styles defensively with their defensive line, and Michael Brockers was that one veteran kind of overlooking it all. And while he played more the year that we acquired him and not as much this past year, I think that is something that is extremely important. And everybody that I've talked to, whether that's in the scouting side, whether that's, former players, they've all stressed the importance of actually having leadership. It's not just something to say, it's something that's extremely important. And I think that's probably the biggest thing that he brought to the Detroit Lions, which we definitely have to give him credit for. And, this stinks. I mean, Michael Brockers was a character, man. I think from the outside looking in, I was a big fan of Michael Brockers. I was excited when we made this deal because of the leadership that he would bring seeing the run-stopping prowess that he had in his background, and we knew schematically he was going to fit because he was with the LA Rams. He was ultimately kind of pigeoned into the trade that we made with Jared Goff and Stafford and the draft picks. He was kind of thrown into that as another part of that deal, and because of that, when it happened, the Lions gave him a 3-year, $24 million deal. And yes, they kind of let out within the deal, and that's right now, and the Lions decided that they needed to open up some of that cap space. To me, it's just one of those things where it makes sense. There's no reason to not make this move because you're kind of going forward. And at the same time, a lot of those young guys, it's your turn, right? You're going year 3 of your deal. It's your turn to kind of take over that, right? Hutchinson, now it's year 2, even though he's more of an edge for us. But point is, these guys are growing up, and it's kind of like, okay, it's your defensive line now. And the Lions can look for a vet. That's very fair. They could do that. But I think for us, saving $10 million is just something that's huge. According to Over the Cap, the Lions will be looking at from about $13 million in cap space to now around $23 million in cap space with this cut, which is massive considering our draft class is about $13 to $14 million the way our picks are currently set. You only count the top 51 though, so that's also an important fact of that. 51 contracts during the offseason, but that's something they have to keep in mind is the draft class as well. But with that being said, appreciate you, Michael Brockers. Thank you for everything. I got a picture with him over here this past season coming into the year. Michael Brockers is an awesome dude from the outside, and I'm wishing him the best of luck, and I'm thankful that he was a part of the Lions for the time that he was. So there is some news I want to start with. Never great to talk about cuts. I don't like to do it. I mean, we kind of saw it coming, but I don't like to do it. But with that being said, wishing him the best and appreciate his time with the Lions. The next news that we have is something that I was not expecting, but it's something that made me dig a little bit. That is reportedly, according to Fowler, the Lions are going to be finalizing a deal for an extension with defensive coordinator Aaron Glenn. Now, here's what's important to this as a whole, is that coaching hirings and coaching salaries are not part of the actual salary cap, right? That does not affect the salary cap at all. So basically, that's something that the team's franchise is responsible for. Now, yes, we've definitely fired coaches early in their deals and things like that. So if you have guarantees, you still have to pay that just like you would a player. But the biggest thing that the kind of vibe that I get from this is that for Sheila, who's of course at the top of this, the owner of the Lions, but all those people that are involved, they have to be looking at this and the way that this thing is trending, and they really feel good about it, where it's almost, I kind of get just a visual of, okay, look, these guys are interviewing for head coaching jobs. Let's make sure that these guys don't go anywhere. And it's kind of one of those things where Shield's like, I want to keep this thing together. Dan Campbell has obviously made it known how important these coordinators are, and we know how important they are because Campbell's not a coordinator, right? He's a head coach that needs an offensive coordinator and needs a defensive coordinator. And what we've seen is positional coaches, we've seen them kind of go in and out, and it's tough to lose those guys, but we've been able to regroup when we've lost positional coaches. We found new guys, but it's the coordinators that are so important. And I think this is awesome news considering we had a couple of interviews that Aaron Glenn had. He's been a hot topic really these past 2 years, even though, we've ranked out poorly defensively this past year. The Detroit Lions ranked out as the 29th defense in total yards, 31st in points allowed, 28th in rushing yards allowed, 24th in pass yards allowed. But as a Lions fan, we can see the growth. We've seen in segments when we've been healthy what that's looked like. And on top of that, I feel like we've legitimately seen an improvement of Aaron Glenn in the time that he's been here. Speaking on him for a second, you see that he adapts and he adjusts and he has different game plans for different teams. But you also understand the philosophy that he wants to bring to the table. Clearly, he does a pretty good job in terms of leadership because he has had a ton of interest, even with a defense that is ranked out poorly. And usually that's not how it goes down. And again, the report is that the Lions are going to be finalizing an extension here soon. It's not, out there yet, but finalizing an extension soon to keep around Aaron Glenn for multiple years. We don't know all the details on that. I don't know them as of now, and we may not get to know those because a lot of times those are kind of something that we don't know from the outside looking in, but that is the report. So I think this is awesome. I was very happy to know that Aaron Glenn was back. I mean, hey, look, you get your opportunity as a head coach, go for it. I have no issue with that, right? Obviously, chase your dreams if that's what you want to be. But at the same time, to get him back as a Lions fan, I think is crucial. And I know we've been harsh on him, during the season. And you can look at those numbers, say, oh man, we're not really, gaining anything by getting him back. But trust me, we are. I really believe that we are. I think we have a very good defensive coordinator here that has an opportunity to take off. And hopefully this extension helps us because it's one of those things where, like I said, we're going to add pieces this offseason. And when we add some pieces and his defense starts to improve, this guy's got interest with a poorly ranked defense. Wait till it starts to improve how much interest this guy is going to get. So, and he's a defensive coach. Like a lot of times now, offensive coaches are the ones getting that interest. So this is awesome. But it also is something that is worth mentioning. Ben Johnson reportedly was given a big-time raise. I mean, I'm not going to go into specifics because I don't know specifics there, but reportedly he was giving a big-time raise for returning to the Lions. And basically saying, hey, look, I don't want to interview for a head coaching job. I'm basically coming back to Detroit. And he kind of explained his reasoning behind that. And we're all super happy to have our offensive coordinator back. We know how massive that is. Even TJ Hawkinson hit on how massive that is for the Lions. But he was reportedly given a big time, raise for being brought back. But the visual I get of this is kind of Sheila could be just looking at this like, okay, I brought in Dan Campbell. I brought in Brad Holmes. She's doing this the right way. She believes in these guys. And now Dan could just be coming to him like, look, I need these guys. And again, this is not something that's part of the salary cap. So the team's franchises paying these people, the coaches. Great news there, I think, on the coaching front with the coordinator. So I just wanted to point that out. You've probably already seen the Ben Johnson one, but the Aaron Glenn one is new. Okay, now the other news I have outside of this is it's not really news. It's kind of just things. Actually, I do have some news. Let's start there first. Also, the Detroit Lions are signing a cornerback. So this is something that I do want to touch on here. And I should have looked at this player. I should have looked into a guy like this. I always look for the guys that have the backgrounds, that kind of come from a place that fits into the same tree of what the Lions' identity is offensively and defensively. And I did not look at this guy, but I'm kicking myself for it because I should have. That is Mac McCain III, cornerback out of North Carolina A&T. So why have I should have looked at this? Because he originally started his career with the Denver Broncos in 2021 as an undrafted free agent. And I should have known, of course, because that was when Vic Fangio was there. That's the Fangio tree. It's where Aaron Glenn comes from, that you have to look at those connections. I always try to look at those connections, and obviously that's an exact connection right there. He's bounced around between basically Denver and Philly this past season. He was basically just on the Philadelphia Eagles practice squad, and when we have seen him in his very small stint, it was just with Philadelphia. He played a little bit at the end of the Philadelphia Eagles and Dallas Cowboys games. It came in 2021 at the end of the season. It was kind of a blowout, so he got in there a little bit, got some action, and unfortunately I wasn't able to find a lot of great film on this player, so if I can revisit this, find more, I will share that with you, but I'm also trying to get this news out pretty quickly. So this is a player that when he came out, of North Carolina A&T, first off, he had a very decorated career there. I mean, this guy put up some great numbers. He was an all-conference player. This is a guy that in his first 20 starts in college had 8 interceptions, 4 pick sixes, and 24 pass breakups. Okay, that's impressive. He measured out as a 5'11", 186-pound corner, which I thought the size there was a little bit bigger than anticipated, but they work for that. His college career, unfortunately, was cut a little short due to injury and also COVID. So they canceled their season in 2020, the COVID season. Because they canceled that season, he basically just opted, of course, he had the year off like Levi did coming out of the draft, and then he opted to go right to the NFL for 2021, and that's why he was an undrafted free agent. On top of that, he also had torn his ACL at the end of the 2018 season, leading into the 2019 season, which unfortunately cut it a little bit short there as well. Now, there's also the side of it where he gave up some plays. I know there were some numbers that he gave up. Just from the little that I watched, his last game that he played in, he gave up like 170 yards receiving in that game. So there was production that was also given up, just to point that out. But with that being said, from what I saw and what I've also read about this player, there are some things. First off, he is a guy that's played well-versed in a lot of different coverage techniques, press bail, off coverage. He's played in a lot of different coverages defensively just in college alone. And of course, he was kind of brought into that Denver Broncos tree, so you immediately had that connection as well. Now, with Philadelphia this past year, with Jonathan Gannon as their defensive coordinator, they were a more heavy zone type of team, a little bit more off coverage, and I think that was kind of his projection coming out, that he'd fit as more of a zone heavy team, because first off, his long speed isn't necessarily dynamic. It's not great long speed that he necessarily has, and where he seems to shine is some of that ability to drive, twitch, work downhill from an off coverage position and break on passes. Also, he kind of has just a natural knack to be in the right place at the right time, head up awareness, get his hands on the football, finish a play, and you could see that by 4 pick sixes. And he also left some out there. He had some dropped interceptions as well. Personality wise, not the biggest guy, but man, that doesn't faze him. He's willing to tackle. Every cornerback the Lions have brought in have pretty much fell into that category of willing to tackle, and you see it. Some of his best plays in college are making tackles. Notice I get some Mike Hughes vibes a little bit here, and just some kind of his press technique, more of the quick feet that you notice. And again, he's not short, so I want to point that out there, okay? 5'11", 6 foot, like he's not the shortest cornerback out there, but he also has some pretty quick feet from what I recognize. He kind of uses that, 2-footed hop back in his press release, working to stay on top of the route. On top of that, his hips seemed like he didn't really go to that as much. Maybe it wasn't always the most natural, most fluid for him to utilize his hips. But again, I'm going to have to see more of that because sometimes even in off coverage, it didn't always look like the most, smooth thing. Adequate length, which definitely shows up a little bit at the catch point. He's a willing tackler. He has quick feet, and he has a knack for getting his hands on the football and an ability to drive. Now, on top of that, he has been beat on double moves because he's pretty aggressive. Like I said, his long speed's a little bit questionable as well, and you wonder about his hips being just a little bit like maybe not unlocking them enough, utilizing them enough in coverage. With that being said, though, I can understand why from the tree side, why the Lions would go after a guy like this. He's more of an outside corner, but could there be a potential that he competes at slot? I think without question, because he does give me some Mike Hughes vibes from press. With that being said, though, being with Philadelphia, who similarly played stylistically somewhat, I mean, the Rams got really zone heavy, but like the Rams, they played a lot of off coverage with their corners. I had David Long in my mock offseason, if you haven't seen that. They played a lot of that. So he's also a guy that had a lot of experience there, and that could be the best fit for him. So I do wonder about slot if we're going to stay as a pretty much press-heavy team, or if we adapt a little bit, play a little more off coverage, which I don't think is going to happen. I think we're going to mix it in, but I don't think it's going to be something that we consistently do is play off and zone, because I don't think that's the philosophy of Aaron Glenn. He wants to impact you at the line. So maybe he has some slot potential within his game. Maybe that's the case. I think with Philly, they actually end up cutting him at one point, and they actually signed a guy that could play slot, so I don't know. I'll have to keep an eye on that one. But yes, a 25-year-old cornerback that had incredible production back in college, the Lions brought in here, and hey, don't overlook these guys. Like we said, we've had futures contracts play for us. Juju Hughes was signed to a futures deal right after the season before. He ended up playing this past year, and he was impactful for us, so don't count these guys out or overlook them. He was a player that honestly probably could have been drafted coming out when he was just undrafted. So this is a player that had a lot of hype, and if I can find more film, we're going to revisit that. I'm pretty sure we're going to do that, so trust me there. Little things just to wrap this thing up. Not going to go super far into these because these aren't really news, but it's just a couple of things that you've probably seen out there. First off, the news today, Tyreek Hill, all right, he was gaming, and there was a little snip video that was put out there of him saying this about Jared Goff. I like Jared Goff. If I had the option to play with him, I'd play with him. That was what was put out there, right? So, again, I didn't really understand the context of it. It seemed like it was just kind of thrown at him as a question, and he said, I like Jared Goff. There's a lot that can be made of this. I don't think I'm going to make too much of this, of course, unless it starts to heat up. But just to make just to make it a little bit fun, just to get the ball rolling a little bit now. Let's think about the Dolphins situation for a second. First off, they don't have a first-round pick this year because it was forfeited because of, the league violations. Secondly, their quarterback's future. I'm hoping for Tua's health. I'm hoping the best there. You have to keep that in mind. He also witnessed Kansas City, his old team, just go win a Super Bowl. I'm sure he likes Tua. I think he does. He talked very highly about Tua, but there is still some questions there about the long-term, position of that, the quarterback position for that team. And on top of that, like we know, the Lions are getting national attention. See, here's the thing. When is the last time you remember the Lions getting this kind of national attention? I'm talking about players talking about the Lions, right? Where it's actually getting surfaced. That to me is big. Whether it's good publicity or bad publicity, there is no bad publicity, as they say. That's a tough word for me to say for some reason. There is none, because you're getting attention. And I think it does speak to the Lions' relevance. Everybody saw us on Sunday Night Football beat Green Bay at their house when they just need to win to get in. It was put on primetime for that reason. Seattle had won. We couldn't get in. It was on for that reason. And now, hey, Jamal Williams is getting interviewed on Good Morning Football, which he always does, ESPN. Like, there's just a relevance right now with the Lions. And I think that's part of this that needs to be brought up. Now, bringing in Tyreek, yeah, it's super unlikely. I mean, first off, when they traded for Tyreek originally, Miami, which, things have changed fast in the NFL, but they did give up, a first-round pick, a second-round pick, 2 fourth-round picks, and a sixth-round pick, and then paid him $120+ million for 4 years. I mean, his cap numbers are pretty massive. We're talking, if the Lions brought him in, according to Over the Cap, we're looking at like $26 million for this upcoming season, $19 million for 2024, $45 million for 2026, even though there's an out 2 years from now, there's an out within his contract. So I think the Dolphins' plan is, we're probably not going to pay him that $45 million. We're going to have to work our way around that. But the point is, it's unlikely, very unlikely, but it's worth bringing up. It is worth bringing up because you know what? Why not? I think it's important that we have that. And Tyreek Hill and J-Mo, that might be the fastest receiver duo in NFL history. I mean, maybe, I don't know. Okay. To tie to that, Jalen Ramsey. This is a little bit of an older story, but I will touch on it. So Jalen Ramsey was basically asked by St. Brown. If you guys did not see Jared Goff mic'd up at the Pro Bowl, it's worth checking out because you saw him talking. You saw those guys chatting it up. There's a lot of Jalen Ramsey chatter. We know that Jared Goff played with Ramsey. There's a ton of ties. The Rams ties, they played together. There's a lot of ties there. And St. Brown confronted him on Twitter saying this: "If you can hear this, I know you played with Goff before. Detroit might seem like a landing spot. My guy, talk to me. Talk to me." That's what he said to Jalen Ramsey. Jalen Ramsey then replied with this: "Much love to Goff and St. Brown." He tagged them both. "Tried my hardest to get y'all in the playoffs this past year. And hey, we saw it, right? The very first play, dude picked it off. He was doing his thing. They just couldn't get it done. But he said he was trying his hardest. He said, I won't comment on my future, though. We'll see," with the laughing emoji at the end. I'm just saying. Now, the response that got a lot of heat was Micah Parsons saying this. He responded with this: "No one going from LA to Detroit." What Micah said in response to this kind of discussion going on between the two. And it got a lot of heat, and I love that, Detroit kind of went at him for this. Well done. With that being said, though, again, the fact that this is being talked about. See, this isn't just one of those things where it's like, okay, Lions, like legitimate recruiting that's getting attention from guys across the league, big names. I think that's worth mentioning. Hey, say whatever you want, Micah Parsons. Say whatever you want. The point is, this is happening. There is chatter going on here. And as me and Rad did our live stream, we may have to revisit this again. I'm all in for going to get Jalen Ramsey. I got no issue with it. The financials are expensive. He'd be paid as a top 10 corner, but it's not completely impossible to take on. We can't not do. It's not one of the things that we can't do financially. You can do it. And you probably have to give up one of your first round picks. Maybe you give him 18 and you keep 6. Be like, hey, you take our first round pick. We keep in 6. Regardless, yes, Rams may be in a position where they may end up doing this. They just released Bobby Wagner, which is also something because Bobby Wagner is still a dog. If you all want to talk linebackers, I mean, he's still available now. They have to kind of reset in terms of they have to open up cap space and get back through the draft and add some talent. So if Jalen was going to be traded, the Lions are definitely going to be interested. It's already been reported that rumors are the Lions would be interested in that if that was a possibility. So I'm not going to get this too much because I want to make sure I get this video out. With that being said, though, this isn't something that's completely impossible. I'm on board with it. We tackled a little bit more of the numbers and things like that in our past live stream, so check that out with me and Rad. But yeah, Jalen Ramsey to Detroit. Is it possible? I think it's definitely possible. I really do. I think it's a legitimate possibility. We'll see. I'm not holding my breath because I think, we're going to figure it out regardless. But I don't think it's a situation that's completely impossible. And man, think about that for a second. If you traded away a first round pick for Ramsey, you're really looking at a situation where you basically traded Goff for Stafford. You also got technically Jameson Williams, but you also gave up a little bit to Minnesota to make that happen. Michael Brockers, who's now being cut. And you could also add Jalen Ramsey to that. Okay. I'm just saying. With that, that is your Detroit Lions latest update. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I'm going to leave it there. Thank you, Bob, for watching, and I'm out.